In the summer of 1858, Abraham Lincoln and Stephen Douglas were both preparing for the upcoming Illinois senatorial election. Douglas, the incumbent at the time, and Lincoln had been engaged in an exchange of letters attempting to schedule a series of debates at various locations throughout the state. By that point in time, both men had made clear their stances on a number of key issues, most notably their stance on the issue of the extension of slavery. Both had therefore developed a strong distaste for the other's political viewpoint, but had otherwise expressed public admiration for them on a personal level. Douglas went so far as to say that Lincoln was a kind-hearted, amiable, good-natured gentleman with whom no man has a right to pick a quarrel, even if he wanted one. Yet during these letters, both men expressed a particular agitation with the other's timing and the manner in which they attempted to orchestrate the upcoming debates. In his letter on July 29th, Lincoln begins, "Yours of the 24th, in relation to an arrangement to divide time and address the same audiences, is received. And in apology for not sooner replying, allow me to say that when I sat by you at dinner yesterday, was not aware that you had answered my note, nor certainly that my note had been presented to you. An hour after I saw a copy of your answer in the Chicago Times, and reaching home, I found the original awaiting me." Lincoln is here referencing a note that Douglas had sent him a few days earlier, but which Lincoln did not receive in a timely fashion. In fact, Lincoln had sent a brief note to Douglas on July 24th, attempting to schedule the times for the two candidates to speak before the same audience. Douglas's response to Lincoln's request is the arrangement to divide time and address the same audiences, of which Lincoln speaks in this letter. Douglas, in his letter on July 24th, had accused Lincoln of a few acts of impropriety with regard to scheduling the debates. He asked Lincoln why the requests had not come sooner, now that Douglas had recently set his entire agenda of meetings and commitments for the upcoming months, especially since the two men had recently spent time together in multiple locales. He claimed that his newly scheduled meetings would take up all of his time and leave no room for other speeches. In addition, Douglas expressed dismay over a rumor he had heard that Lincoln had arranged for a potential third candidate, Justice Sidney Breese of the Illinois Supreme Court, to also run for office. Douglas's concern was centered around the fact that this other candidate would also argue against him and would ask to take part in the debates, further reducing the amount of time that Douglas himself would get to speak. In spite of these concerns, Douglas proposed a series of 7 debates at various locations around the state where the two men would be able to divide time and alternate opening and concluding their speeches. After acknowledging receipt of the letter, Lincoln continues, "Protesting that your insinuations of attempted unfairness on my part are unjust, and with the hope that you did not very considerately make them, I proceed to reply." Lincoln does not wait until any further into his response to decry the claims of wrongdoing doled out by Douglas. He even goes so far as to accuse Douglas of making the claims without thinking. While it is apparent that Douglas, despite his accusations against Lincoln here, believed his opponent to be an admirable man, Lincoln's personal feelings about Douglas are not as clear, as demonstrated in his own fragment on Douglas. Lincoln immediately goes on to reply to each of the specific accusations made by Douglas one by one. He begins by replying to the claim that he was attempting to bring a third candidate into the election by writing, "To your statement that it has been suggested recently that an arrangement had been made to bring out a third candidate for the U.S. Senate who, with yourself, should canvass the state in opposition to me, I can only say that such a suggestion must have been made by yourself, for certainly none such has been made by or to me, or otherwise to my knowledge. Surely you did not deliberately conclude, as you insinuate, that I was expecting to draw you into an arrangement of terms to be agreed on by yourself, by which a third candidate and myself, in concert, might be able to take the opening and closing speech in every case." Lincoln does not offer any specifics with this denial, other than to say that it's not true. His use of the phrase, "surely you did not deliberately conclude," once again places Douglas's own intelligence and moral standing into question. Lincoln is insinuating to Douglas that if he did believe such an arrangement to be true, not only would he be insulting his opponent, but also degrading his own ability to decipher the truth. If Douglas did hold Lincoln in high moral regard, this adamant denial, even without any specifics, would suffice in quashing that suggestion. In fact, Justice Breese, who had previously been a threat to Lincoln in the 1854 election, had allowed his name to be floated as a possible third candidate for office, but there is no evidence to support the claim that Lincoln himself had a hand in that proposal. The next claim that Lincoln attempts to discount is the one that he had deliberately waited until after Douglas's schedule was already set for the remaining months before suggesting times for debates. He writes, "As to your surprise that I did not sooner make the proposal to divide time with you, I can only say I made it as soon as I resolved to make it. I did not know but that such proposal would come from you. I waited respectfully to see." Lincoln explains that he was waiting to hear from Douglas before proposing dates himself, knowing that Douglas was the favored candidate and most likely had the busier schedule of the two. In fact, Lincoln spent the earlier summer months in the shadow of Douglas, making speeches and holding audiences, but not to the same extent of his opponent. He then continues, "It may have been well known to you that you went to Springfield for the purpose of agreeing on the plan of campaign, but it was not so known to me. When your appointments were announced in the papers extending only to the 21st of August, I, for the first time, considered it certain that you would make no proposal to me, and then resolved that if my friends concurred, I would make one to you. As soon thereafter as I could see and consult with friends unsatisfactorily, I did make the proposal. It did not occur to me that the proposed arrangement could derange your plans after the latest of your appointments already made. After that, there was before the election largely over 2 months of clear time." Lincoln, therefore, explains to Douglas that he waited until he saw Douglas' public appearances published in the newspapers before proposing the debates. Lincoln does not appear to have been attempting to interfere with Douglas' schedule, as his proposals for debates were in fact all from August 21st and after. Lastly, Lincoln lays out his defense for Douglas's assertion that Lincoln had gotten the last word in most of their prior engagements. He writes, "For you to say that we've already spoken at Chicago and Springfield, and that on both occasions I had the concluding speech, is hardly a fair statement. The truth rather is this. At Chicago, July 9th, you made a carefully prepared conclusion on my speech of June 16th. 24 hours after, I made a hasty conclusion on yours of the 9th. You had 6 days to prepare, and concluded on me again at Bloomington on the 16th. 24 hours after, I concluded on you again at Springfield. In the meantime, you had made another conclusion on me at Springfield, which I did not hear, and of the contents of which I knew nothing when I spoke, so that your speech made in daylight and mine at night of the 17th, at Springfield, were both made in perfect independence of each other. The dates of making all these speeches will show, I think, that in the matter of time for preparation, the advantage has been all on your side, and that none of the external circumstances have stood to my advantage." These speeches to which Lincoln refers were not in the same debate format as the proposal about which the two men were now conversing. Rather, these were a series of speeches made by one candidate or the other, which were followed up by the other at a later time. Douglas made the claim that Lincoln had the last word in each case. In his response here, Lincoln is sure to outline the specific dates and circumstances around each of the previous 3 speech locations that Douglas brought up. Lincoln, once again, carefully chooses the words he uses to describe the circumstances around each of the speeches. He claims that Douglas gave a carefully prepared speech in one instance and had 6 days prepare for another, and gave his other speech in daylight. On the contrary, his own speeches are described as hasty, given with only 24 hours to prepare, and given at night. In these ways, Lincoln subtly jabs at Douglas's oratorical skills, claiming that even with these advantages, the results have been inconclusive. Since the purpose of the proposed debates was for the two men to square off at the same time and speak on the same issues and to the same audience, Lincoln uses specific language as a way to intimidate Douglas in these letters. He leaves no stone unturned when it comes to his response to Douglas's accusations. Lincoln concludes his letter by accepting the terms laid out by Douglas. He writes, "I agree to an arrangement for us to speak at the 7 places you have named, and at your own times, provided you name the times at once, so that I, as well as you, can have to myself the time not covered by the arrangement. As to other details, I wish perfect reciprocity and no more. I wish as much time as you, and the conclusions shall alternate. That is all. Once again, Lincoln takes a shot at Douglas by asking for perfect reciprocity and no more, implying that had not been the case up until that point. Lincoln uses language to flip the claims made against him into violations of fairness by Douglas himself. Following his signature, Lincoln adds a brief postscript, writing, P.S. As matters now stand, I shall be at no more of your exclusive meetings, and for about a week from today, a letter from you will reach me at Springfield. A.L. This is one final opportunity for Lincoln to show Douglas his frustration with his opponent's prior actions. It is one final opportunity for Lincoln to have the concluding argument, as he had been accused of in the prior debates. He wants to make sure Douglas knows that he will no longer dine with him or attend his private events, as he had done only a few days earlier. The overall tone of this letter is sarcastic and pointed. Lincoln does not hold back in not only addressing Douglas's claims, but also in throwing his own barbs. This appears to be among the final direct correspondences between the two prior to the famed debates. This letter provides an insight into the fact that even while the large issues around slavery, popular sovereignty, and union were the dominating factors on the minds of the candidates, they were still plagued by petty disagreements and argued over minor details.